Alex's hands trembled as he clutched his phone, staring at the screen in disbelief. The numbers couldn't be right. It had to be a mistake. But as his financial advisor's frantic voice crackled through the speaker, the horrible truth sank in. He was ruined. Just yesterday, Alex had been on top of the world. At 35, he was living the Miami dream. A stunning beachfront mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the Atlantic. His garage housed a collection of luxury cars that would make any auto enthusiast weak at the knees. A sleek Lamborghini for nights out, a classic Aston Martin for Sunday drives, and a top-of-the-line Tesla for his eco-conscious image. Docked at the nearby marina was his pride and joy. A 100-foot yacht cheekily named Easy Money. Alex's journey from a middle-class Tampa kid to a self-made tech millionaire had been the stuff of legends. He'd worked his way through college, eating ramen and pulling all-nighters to graduate at the top of his class. His big break came when he developed a revolutionary app that streamlined supply chain logistics. Investors had thrown money at him, and within 5 years, he was worth 9 figures. With his newfound wealth came a lifestyle that most could only dream of. His closets were filled with designer suits and limited-edition sneakers. He dined at Michelin-starred restaurants and jetted off to exotic locations on a whim. His social calendar was a non-stop whirlwind of charity galas, VIP club openings, and celebrity parties. Everyone wanted a piece of Alex, to be seen with him, to be part of his world. Now, on this otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning, Alex's empire was crumbling. The company he'd invested most of his fortune in had been exposed as a massive fraud. Overnight, the stock had plummeted to zero, taking Alex's millions with it. Worse still, the SEC was investigating everyone involved. His assets were frozen, his accounts locked. In the blink of an eye, Alex had gone from having more money than he could spend to not being able to buy a cup of coffee. The next few days passed in a haze of disbelief and panic. Alex sat in his massive living room, surrounded by the trappings of wealth that now felt like a cruel joke. The abstract art piece he'd bought for a cool $1 million now seemed to mock him with its chaotic swirls. The Italian leather sofa that had once felt so luxurious now seemed to swallow him whole. He kept expecting his phone to ring, for his vast network of friends to reach out, to offer support or at least sympathy. The story of his financial ruin was splashed across local news and trending on social media. Surely someone would call. But the phone remained eerily silent. The constant buzz of notifications that had been the soundtrack to his life had gone quiet. The silence was deafening, a constant reminder of how quickly the world had turned its back on him. As the reality of his situation sank in, Alex felt a weight on his chest that made it hard to breathe. He'd always defined himself by his wealth, by what he could buy and who he could impress. Now, stripped of all that, who was he? The question echoed in his mind, keeping him awake at night as he tossed and turned in his king-sized bed that suddenly felt too big, too empty. The first real blow came when Melissa, his girlfriend of 2 years, came to see him. She was a model he'd met at a Fashion Week after party, all long legs and perfect hair. For a brief moment, Alex felt a flicker of hope. At least she was here for him. Maybe, just maybe, what they had was real. "Alex, we need to talk," Melissa said, her voice flat, and her eyes avoiding his. She stood awkwardly in the entrance of the living room, designer handbag clutched tightly as if she was afraid to touch anything. "I'm so glad you're here," Alex started, relief washing over him. He stood up, moving towards her with open arms. "I've been trying to figure out what to do and—" "I'm leaving, Alex," Melissa cut him off, taking a step back. Her words hung in the air, sharp and cold. "This isn't what I signed up for. I can't be with someone who has nothing." The words hit Alex like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. He watched, stunned, as Melissa turned on her heel and walked out the door, the click of her stilettos on the marble floor fading away. She took the last remnants of his old life with her, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her expensive perfume and the crushing weight of rejection. That night, alone in his soon-to-be repossessed mansion, Alex broke down. He cried for the first time since he was a child, great heaving sobs that echoed through the empty rooms. The sound of his own anguish frightened him, but he couldn't stop. Years of pent-up emotions, the stress of maintaining his image, the constant pressure to succeed, the gnawing fear that it could all disappear, came pouring out. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Alex found himself sitting on the floor of his walk-in closet, surrounded by rows of designer clothes that now seemed as meaningless as costumes. He picked up a $5,000 suit jacket, running his fingers over the fine wool. Just weeks ago, he would have worn this to a board meeting without a second thought. Now, it felt like it belonged to a stranger. The weeks that followed were a blur of humiliation and loss. Lawyers, bank meetings, creditors. Alex's life became an endless parade of people picking apart the carcass of his former wealth. He had to sell everything, his cars, his art collection, even his designer clothes. Each sale felt like he was selling a piece of himself, stripping away the identity he'd built. The mansion and the yacht were seized, the easy money sign mockingly bright as it was towed away. Alex watched from the beach, a lump in his throat as he remembered the parties he'd hosted on board, the deals he'd closed on its sun-drenched deck. But perhaps the most painful part was the deafening silence from his so-called friends. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was as if Alex had become invisible, erased from the glittering world he'd once ruled. The people who had once clamored for his attention at parties now crossed the street to avoid him. His social media accounts, once overflowing with likes and comments, became ghost towns. The final blow came when Alex had to move out of his mansion. With nowhere else to go and his reputation in tatters, he ended up in a tiny, rundown studio apartment in a part of Miami he'd never even visited before. The contrast was stark. From a 10,000 square foot mansion to a 400 square foot box with peeling wallpaper and a temperamental air conditioner. Standing in that cramped room, surrounded by the few possessions he had left, some clothes, a laptop, and a box of photos from happier times, Alex hit rock bottom. He sat on the threadbare carpet and put his head in his hands, the reality of his new life crushing down on him. "How did I get here?" he whispered to the empty room, his voice cracking. "Who am I without all my stuff? Does anyone even care about me anymore?" The questions hung in the air, unanswered. For the first time in his adult life, Alex felt truly alone. The silence of the tiny apartment was broken only by the hum of traffic outside and the occasional drip of the leaky faucet in the kitchenette. It was in that moment, at his lowest point, that Alex made a decision. He could give up, let the despair swallow him whole, or he could fight. And Alex, the boy from Tampa who had built an empire from nothing, chose to fight. The next morning, Alex woke up with a new sense of purpose. The weight on his chest was still there, but it felt a little lighter. He looked at himself in the cracked mirror above the sink, really looked at himself for the first time in years. He didn't have millions anymore, but he still had his skills, his education, and his determination. "I built it all once," he told his reflection, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I can do it again." Getting a job wasn't easy. His reputation was in tatters, and no one wanted to hire the guy at the center of a financial scandal. Alex spent days walking the streets of Miami, dropping off resumes at every business that would take them. He faced rejection after rejection, each no chipping away at his resolve. But he persisted. Finally, swallowing the last remnants of his pride, Alex took a job as a waiter at a small cafe in a quiet neighborhood. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd once dropped thousands on single meals, and now he was serving $10 breakfasts. The work was hard, harder than anything he'd done in years. His feet ached after long shifts of running between tables. His back hurt from carrying trays. His hands, once manicured to perfection, became rough and chapped from dish soap. The pay was low, barely enough to cover rent and basic necessities. There were nights when Alex went to bed hungry, a far cry from the gourmet meals he once enjoyed. But something strange began to happen. For the first time in years, Alex felt like he was earning every dollar. There was a satisfaction in a job well done that he'd never experienced in his high-flying corporate days. He started to appreciate the small things, a kind word from a customer, the camaraderie with his coworkers, the simple pleasure of a home-cooked meal in his tiny apartment. Slowly, Alex began to make real friends, not people who wanted something from him, but people who genuinely enjoyed his company. There was Maria, the single mom who worked the morning shift with him, always ready with a joke to lift his spirits on tough days. Tom, the retired teacher who came in every day for coffee, stayed to chat about books and politics, treating Alex like an equal rather than a cautionary tale. For the first time in his life, Alex felt truly connected to the people around him. He wasn't hiding behind his wealth or his possessions. He was just Alex. And to his surprise, he found that he liked this version of himself more than the millionaire he'd been. Months passed. Alex kept working hard, picking up extra shifts whenever he could. He started taking online classes at night, updating his tech skills and learning new programming languages. His tiny apartment became a hub of activity, half workspace, half classroom. Slowly, he began to rebuild not just his life, but himself. It wasn't easy. There were nights when Alex missed his old life so much it physically hurt. Times when he'd walk past a luxury car dealership and feel a pang of longing for his lost Lamborghini. Moments when the struggle seemed too hard, when he was tempted to give up and accept his fall from grace as final. But every time he felt like quitting, he remembered how empty his life had been before, how lonely he'd been even surrounded by people. He thought of Maria's resilience in the face of single parenthood, of Tom's quiet contentment with a life well lived, and he kept going. 2 years after his fall from grace, Alex's hard work began to pay off. A regular at the cafe, impressed by Alex's work ethic and charm, recommended him for a job at a small but growing tech company. Alex threw himself into the interview process, his passion for technology reignited. He landed the job, starting at an entry-level position but quickly making his mark. His innovative ideas and tireless work ethic stood out. Within a year, he was leading his own team. 6 months after that, he was offered a partnership in the company. As the company grew, so did Alex's bank account. But this time, things were different. Alex didn't rush out to buy a mansion or a flashy car. Instead, he lived simply, saved wisely, and focused on the relationships that truly mattered. He volunteered at a local coding boot camp, mentoring kids from underprivileged backgrounds who reminded him of his younger self. And then one day, it happened. Alex checked his account balance and realized he was a millionaire again. But this time it didn't feel like the most important thing in the world. It was just a number, not a measure of his worth. That same week, Alex received some interesting messages. Old friends who had disappeared when he lost everything suddenly wanted to reconnect. Ex-girlfriends reminisced about the good old days. Even Melissa reached out. hinting that she'd love to get coffee sometime, catch up on old times. But Alex didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew who his real friends were now. Maria, Tom, his co-workers, the kids he mentored, people who had stood by him when he had nothing to offer but himself. That night, Alex sat on the balcony of his modest but comfortable apartment. He looked out at the Miami skyline, thinking about how far he'd come. The lights of the city glittered, but they no longer represented the allure of wealth and status. Instead, they reminded him of the warmth of the cafe on a busy morning, of the spark in a student's eye when they grasped a difficult concept, of the quiet moments of connection that had become the true riches in his life. A smile played on his lips as he realized a profound truth. Losing everything had been the best thing that ever happened to him. He had lost his money, but he had found himself. And that was worth more than all the millions in the world. As the sun set over Miami, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Alex felt a sense of peace he'd never known in his previous life. He was no longer defined by his bank account or his possessions. He was defined by his resilience, his compassion, and the genuine connections he'd forged. Alex had learned the hard way that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the richness of one's character and relationships. And by that measure, he was the richest man in Miami.